recorded in the beautiful mountains of British Columbia. Welcome to
Friends on Horses.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we get to interview a man that started in bull riding and later found yoga and meditation. He grew up in rodeo and now spends 10 days annually in silent meditation. In addition to this interesting journey, we will talk to our guest about his work with myofascial release and pulsed electromagnetic field therapies. Welcome to the podcast, Randy Hambling. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I guess I always like to start at the beginning, and I'd just be curious to know, what was your journey with horses? How did that begin for you, and when did that begin for you?
Well, I started when I was about probably 7 or so. I guess I got my first horse, and then my dad, he started team roping at about the same time, and I was just kind of fascinated with it. And I started roping by the time I was about 9 years old, and then I was riding steers at the same time, and then I just always had a horse and always roped growing up through high school, and we had some cattle around, and then I'd go help the neighbors and stuff too, and so it was more of a working deal. And then I team roped all through high school, and then I had a really good buckskin horse when I was about 18, and I wound up selling him to a guy. He wound up winning the NFR twice anyways, and traded him for a gray horse that my mom still has actually now. And he twisted a gut and died the next day. So I kept the horse, and then so after that I kind of shied away from roping a bit and didn't know if I was really meant to be a horse trader, and kind of bounced back and forth riding bulls, and then just taking on outside horses and working on ranches and roping a little bit. And then team roping never really counted for the all-around, so I didn't take it too serious, and I was more involved in the bull riding and stuff. And it really did affect me losing that horse too. Like, it just didn't sit well. And then after that I got hurt a lot riding bulls. I was a good bull rider, but and kind of kept going back to them. And then I always, after quite a few surgeries and stuff, and I quit once, and I said I always just planned on going back and training horses and working on ranches and doing that, and just going back roping. And I said I can do whatever I want to my body as long as I don't wreck my shoulders, or I can rope. So sure enough, I popped my right shoulder out and couldn't rope anymore, and kind of had everything stripped away from me at once and needed surgery. So I wound up not having to get surgery. I got an job in the oil field, and that's when I started yoga and meditation and stuff. And then after I didn't wind up having to get surgery, and just kind of left the whole Western world and started to meditate, and just because I had pretty much every one of my values ripped away, and said I was done with horses unless I could do it my way and find a way to make them feel better. And I couldn't, from understanding my own body and what stretching and stuff did for me and the fascia, I couldn't figure out a way to really help a horse. So I just kind of kept looking and traveled, and I did try and go back and work out a ranch in Vernon, and just the way they treated their animals and stuff just didn't sit well with me. And then I wound up finding myofascial release about 3 years ago, and a friend of mine was doing it, and her horses, and I'm just a results-based person, and I seen what it did, and I started it on that and practice on I took the course after about a year, and then went with her for a bit, and then I was just about to go out on my own, and then I discovered this PEMF machine, and then it made the two just went so well together that I just decided to buy one and go out on my own. And it's been a journey. I've been at it about a year now, and I started out in the wagons, in the chuck wagons in the rodeo world, and then just slowly made my way over to BC. I might be heading back that way, but things have changed right now, so we'll see. This whole week has really shook things up, so not too sure what's happening now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Like, it's a lot, but if you have any questions, I don't know.
There's so much in there that Emma and I are definitely going to have more questions that we want to go into. I'm wondering if I can just back you up a little bit. Here in the West Kootenays, and I'm sure there's other listeners out there that aren't super connected to a rodeo community, can you just kind of expand for us and maybe give us a bit more detail? When you're bull riding, what is that like? Like, how does it go?
It's just it's hard to explain, but it just it forces you to be very, very present. It's a lot, like it's a huge head, so there's just so much going on, and then you break it down and it's very technical, but as hard as it was on me, I miss it. It makes you present. It's very similar, I guess, to when you're riding and stuff. If things are going right, you're just paying attention to what's exactly going on at that moment. Kind of like when you're tuning in with a horse. It's similar to that, but a lot more adrenaline, I guess. No.
And is the premise similar to bronc riding, where you're trying to stay on the bull for 8 seconds, or?
Well, the bronc riding and stuff, you're trying to move your feet, and there's timing and stuff, and in the bull riding, there's no real rules, but just stay on. But it's very technical, and it doesn't always go as planned, and it's interesting. I've never felt anything like it. I actually do really miss it, but my body just doesn't let me do it, and it's not smart. It's not a smart sport. So
fair enough. I'm curious. So if you were to paint a picture of what it's like, so you've got, and I don't know anything about it, and I will say all the wrong things, so you get to correct me. But I'm assuming like you're in a shoot, you get are the bulls picked by draw? Is that how that works? Like how does that matchup happen?
For the most part now they're getting, so like you'll draw your long round bull, like your first round bull, and then you'll pick your bulls as you come back. There is some sort of draft system, so you get to know them really well, and but they're a live animal, and you can kind of guess what they're gonna do. They're just like anything. Some have almost the same tracks every time. Some you have no idea. It's kind of a guessing game. So you're always just going jump for jump and just completely by feel. Like it's like I don't know. I can compare it to skiing, and it's like dropping off a big cliff, and you just take what's coming as you come at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and there's no checking out. So,
which means you really have to be, as you said, present. I'm sure, because you're forced to. Because if you're not totally in the zone right here and now, that's you're risking a lot.
Yeah, and like I read Eckhart Tolle a little bit, and the way that he explains things, he says that's why these dangerous sports and stuff and whatever we do is almost so addictive, because it just forces you to be present, and that's how we're supposed to be all the time.
Yeah.
He said, so I'm trying. But yeah, that one just forces you into it.
And did you find yoga because of your injuries that you had bull riding, or how was that connection made? Because you also teach, is that right? Like you taught yoga?
I have taught. I'm probably going to go back. I think I'm going to teach some at Renee's, like I've done when I was back in Alberta. I did just a little yoga class before. I just helped a barrel racing instructor with a few of her students, and she just said it just for the mind aspect of it, because there was a lot of beginners and a lot of fear-based stuff, so it just really seemed to help. So I'm probably going to start doing we're trying to get something figured out at Renee's here once the snow melts and everything settles down. So I'll probably start teaching a little bit before then and maybe work with some of her students. But the way that I got into it was, and I had a lot of injuries. Like in 2002, I was winning Canada, I guess, and was getting pretty close down in the States, like into the top 45 in the world.
Wow.
I had a bull. Basically what happened was a bull was spinning to the right and I ride with my left hand, and I went on the inside of the spin and my rope slid down with me, and then my elbow touched the ground, and then he jumped ahead and swung me around in front of him. Then my left leg crossed in between his two front legs, and he stepped ahead and broke my leg and then flopped over on his side, and the bridge of his shoulder landed on my nose, and he rolled once and come back down, then rolled off the back of my head. So for whatever reason, it didn't knock me out, and I remember it all. But every bone in my face was broken, my leg was broke, my brain was bleeding, I had a fractured skull. So that put me out for about 8 months, and then I was back riding in about a year, or 8 months, I guess. And so it took me a little while. I had a little trouble coming back because I had to get a hernia surgery, right? I came back and then got a hernia surgery and then started riding again, I guess. But I went for the next year. I did really good. I think I wound up 13th in Canada, and had a really, really slow start. And then the next year I tore the labrum in my left shoulder, and the doctors told me there was nothing wrong with it. And I went to sports medicine 9 times, I think, and they kept telling me to get it stronger. So I gained 25 pounds at the gym just trying to get it stronger, and then finally got in to see a surgeon, and he said they couldn't even tell what it was because there was too much scar tissue and stuff in there. So, and I was trying to ride through it the whole time too. So it was, I got really, really detached from my body, I guess. Like you can block out, like pain's just a sensation in the body, and you can block a lot of stuff out. And I was just very, very detached from my body. So I wound up, I decided to quit after that, and then I really missed it still, so I decided, I should just try and come back once more. As long as I can rope and train horses, I'll be fine. And sure enough, that's when I popped my right shoulder out and couldn't rope and had $500 to my name. Yeah, it was good. And then I had the same surgeon, and he said just get it strong before surgery. And that's when I started yoga, and I read a little bit of Eckhart Tolle stuff and started doing some of his meditations. And I never had to get surgery, and I could rope better than I ever did before, actually, and I just didn't care. So I just kind of went off and did my own thing for a few years and learned some stuff, and just starting to get back to it now. So
I wonder about the two things. First, every time both Mira and I have had head injuries. So every time I watch, a bull rider do their thing, I'm like, oh no, head trauma. It's so hard to watch, but you must love it so much to be putting your body through that over and over again. And I'm sure we've all experienced that. And eventually, sometimes we realize the risk isn't worth it. Sometimes the risk is worth it. I guess that's more of a comment, but then I think about you're doing something that you love that much, and you're putting your body through all of that because obviously it means a lot to you, but then realizing that you can't do it anymore. What's the psychological impact of that? How was that transition for you?
Well, it was huge. Like, that was the hardest thing, even because, like, I always, and that's where it really made me take a good look at myself, because I always saw myself as a confident person. But as soon as I couldn't rope and didn't have my horses and couldn't ride bulls anymore, I was nothing. Like, I just realized. So the transition was really hard, but I was forced into it. Like, it was either kind of, because I had everything taken away, I guess, or everything in my eyes taken away from me all at once. So it made me realize what it was, and it's just, yeah, we're just grown-ups playing a kid's game, pretty much, and it is what it is. And yeah, I don't need to. It's almost like it's almost like being a drug addict, I guess, because you know it's awful for you, but it just, you chase that sensation. um there has been a few of my friends set themselves up very well, but for the most part, it's a tough one. And um also, like, how we learn and stuff, like, I have a pretty big debate over that, because with like, my bull riding teacher, he did a lot of visualization and stuff, and he used the book Psycho-Cybernetics. And it just shows what your mind can do, but it also shows, like, how detached from the sensations of your body you can be. It's like with when I wrecked my shoulder, I knew, like, there was part of me that knew there was something wrong with it, but I just thought I wasn't tough enough to ride bulls anymore, and I had a torn ligament in my shoulder, and the thing wouldn't dislocate, but it would drop about 2-3 inches every time I got on a bull. So I was just so detached from my body, and just pushed myself through so many things, and just numb myself to so much that now I think that's why a lot of their like, the rodeo world got shook up with that Ty Posabon, that suicide and stuff, and I think that's why a lot of these things are starting to come up. I'm starting to understand it, and just the way the mind works. If you just, because we have such a, in the rodeo world, especially anything, it's always be positive, be positive, be positive. So if you're telling somebody, oh, a room full of bull riders, man, I don't feel very good, I have a headache all the time, it's just not acceptable. So you just block that out almost. And, like, that's how things can really build up, I think. Like, we have to push ourselves, but we also really need to know ourselves. And that's kind of what I learned through yoga and meditation, was just a lot of the things that I just didn't notice. You just learn to work through pain, and and, like, to me, pain's a good thing. That means your body's working and it's healing, but you gotta also be aware of it. And yeah, I don't know. It's but I'm glad I'm done now, and I'm glad it worked out the way things are, because it's forced me to do so many things that I never would have done before. So.
Well, and I really appreciate you being so open about talking about your experience. As Emma shared, both Emma and I have had concussions and head injuries, and it's not something we often talk about in the horse world, and it is a very dangerous sport that we all engage in all the time. And there really is nothing like going through that grief and loss process, especially when it comes to something like a sport that you've been engaging in for a really long time, and potentially not being able to do that anymore. So I appreciate you being really open about that, because I'm sure there's lots of people out there who can really relate. I know that I certainly can, and yeah, so just thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so I'm curious, you kind of alluded to it earlier, just around how it was sort of yoga and your own kind of journey with starting to experience your body in a different way that brought you to body work with horses. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, like, I don't know, I started to, like, I've always been able to find, like, little sore spots on horses and stuff, and then I could tell things were off, and when you had to warm one up for a long time. But all the people, like the chiropractors didn't work for me. I found it just didn't just didn't. I don't know why, but I never had any luck with them. Maybe I didn't find a good one. And then I seen it on horses, and I had a horse get really screwed up by a chiropractor once, and then that left me with a bad taste in my mouth. And then a few of the people that I had out, I didn't see results. So I didn't know what to do. And then I started to learn my own body. And with yoga, what really helped me, like I started out with the hot classes just because it was more of an ego thing. Like if I'm going to go to yoga, it's got to be hot and it's got to be hard. And that's all I do to start with. But then I started those yin classes and then I started to learn about the fascia and how the only way I could really find to get into the fascia for myself was a 2.5 minute passive stretch on the ground, similar to yoga. And I'm not a person who likes being touched either. So the fascia it's getting into it's very psychological. So if you're tensed up, you're not getting into it. So I wanted to learn with horses, but I couldn't find anything. Like, how do you teach a horse to passively stretch on the ground for? I'm not that handy, I guess. I don't know. So I a friend of mine started doing. She found this myofascial release. She was getting it done on herself, and then she found a course down in the States, and I kind of blew it off. I'm like, oh yeah, we'll see when it happens. So she got home, and I knew her horses really well, and her horses started getting better. Like, you could see it. You could see they liked it. And so I got her to start showing me some stuff, and it all made sense to me. And so then she wound up having a course, and I followed her around for off and on for a couple 3 months, and then just moved on to my own horses. And then the PEMF come up, and the way it works with all the science and stuff behind it, it's really working with the fascia and the soft tissue as well. And the two just go together. If I can't get it with my hands, the machine will seem to get it, and vice versa. Like, it's interesting. And then I know with myself where I like the machine, it was well, for my headaches and like all my concussions and stuff, because it'll get to those. I've used it enough now, I can almost tell you exactly where it's gonna go on my head and stuff. And if I have a headache, like the whole thing changes. So yeah, like I guess I should explain it a little bit. It comes in a muscle pulse. I don't know if you guys have seen them before or not.
No, maybe just before you go into explaining that, I might just get you to back up just for those who don't know what fascia is. Can you just briefly explain for our listeners just what fascia is and how it works?
Well, the fascia is it's a connective tissue in between it gets a little morbid, I guess, but if you take like a roast beef and that little web that's on there, so that runs through us 3-dimensionally, basically. So what they find is when there's a dormant area of the body or an injury, it's the body's protective mechanism to crystallize that fascia. So that's why, like, around a bruise or anything like that, you'll get everything's crystallized. So that when that fascia crystallizes, it pulls at 1,800 pounds per square inch. And what they're finding now, and like that, I guess that's why like a chiropractic adjustment is such a big deal. So if you don't loosen all that stuff off, then that's why the big harumph is kind of necessary. So like if I do a horse's pelvis or anything and I'm struggling with it, I just keep loosening it off. Like, I could barely push you over when I do a horse's pelvis. So yeah, and if it gets too hard, I just keep loosening. And a lot of times they'll actually, with my machine, I can get them to put their own pelvises back in if I spend enough time back there. They'll just usually start stepping and it'll go. It's interesting. So, but what they're finding now, and like but they don't really know a whole bunch about the fascia. They just really have the technology in like the last 12, 15 years to start to understand it. But it's basically, a lot of scientists are saying it's the system that connects all systems. So each one of those spider webs is like a mini living you within itself, and it's always changing, it's always moving, and it's connects all our systems together. So
oh, sorry, Randy. I just thought. Go ahead.
No, I forget what I was gonna say now. So yeah.
I messed it up. Sorry. I just wanted to say, so full disclosure. Also certified body worker.
Yeah.
The first thing that I became certified in was working through with skeletal work, so like chiropractic work.
Yeah.
However, I really found that, and I still do that, but I really found that when I started after I got certified, some of my clients I was having to see too frequently. We weren't really getting at and solving those issues long term.
Yeah.
And then moving on from there, recognizing that the body works as a whole, adding the soft tissue component, particularly the fascia, into my work really, really helped me with however hard it is on business. The goal is always to see your clients less, right? So
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so I really found myself that learning to work with fascia particularly was a big piece in helping the skeleton, and then some of the soft tissue work that wasn't quite shifting the way I wanted it to. The fascia was a huge piece of that. So that really resonates with me. But I thought it may be important to just mention that, yeah, I certainly come from the chiropractic end of things. I still use that. However, these other pieces are really, really important. So anyways, yeah, and then the pulsed electromagnetic field therapies I haven't tried, and I think it's so cool. I'd love you to describe to our listeners what that looks like and how that works.
Well, basically, like I've got on a horse, I got attachments. Like I'll have a set of wings that'll cover both sides of their withers, and you can, you can adjust them any which way, so you can get over their whole body. But it sends a magnetic pulse, and it's basically set to the same frequency as the Earth. So what they found was our body just really responds to that and needs that magnetic pulse of the Earth. So the Earth will put out 6 to 26 Gauss, just depending where you are. That's the measurement for the magnetic field. And my machine will put out 26,000 Gauss. So it changes when I think the number is about 14,000. After 10 minutes at about 14,000 Gauss, you're changed on a cellular level.
Wow.
So you can pull your blood and see it. So your white blood cells are twice the size, and the positive and negative ions are reset, basically. So it just puts the body in a healing space. And for whatever reason, and my machines really surprised me a few times, but it'll just come out wherever your body decides. You have no control. So if you have, say, it dropped over that horse's withers, and it seems to go after new inflammation before the atrophied stuff, which really, really surprised me. But it'll go right to that new inflammation and stick to one side if it's like I worked on a horse with a grizzly bear that got attacked by a grizzly bear. What was it, 2 years ago? So it was I guess, what was it? Yeah, probably 8 months after its injury, I guess. So I thought, like, you could see it. She was a tough old mare, and you could see where she kind of scarred up, and she was kind of had legs and stuff everywhere, but she was making it. And so as soon as I put those wings on there, I thought that it would go straight to that side that got attacked by the bear. You could see it scarred, but it went all to the other side because she was just compensating so much, and like that other side was so muscled up, and so I had to just go back with my smaller attachment and just get the side that was atrophied. But yeah, like when it decided to come out there, and even with myself, like because I'll have some headaches and stuff from my concussions, and when I have a headache and I use that machine, I'll put this little ring on top of my head and all over. I use it on my body, I guess. But anywhere I put it on my lower half of my body, it'll go to my face when I have a headache. When I don't have a headache, I'll just put it on my shoulder. It'll go away. Like it's really interesting. And same as a back pad, it's either going to go to if you lay down on it, it'll either go to your psoas, your stomach, or your shoulders, and you have no control of your body, just decides. It's interesting.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So cool.
And the nice thing about it is there's so much science behind it, because how they really just started to figure it out was the first time the astronauts went to space, they got space sickness or whatever they called it. So they got the osteoporosis, and there's a few things. They got really sick when they came down, and they didn't know what they were lacking. So what it turns out is they just have a small personal machine with it. So that's what they have to go to space and that's what allows them to stay up there. If not, they'd have 30 days. So they've done just a lot of science behind it. So
cool.
So and it's been in the European healthcare system for 40 years, like the high-end European. So there's a lot to it.
So if it's good enough for our astronauts, it should be good enough for our horses.
It should be. There's a team of doctors trying to get it in the States, trying to get it implemented. But our healthcare system, it is what it is. But it works, so it's interesting. It's really surprised me a few times.
That's so cool. And back to like the bull riding piece, and the I'm sure there are a lot of, or this makes me wonder if there are a lot of misconceptions about bull riders, because people tend to think, cowboys, and they don't connect cowboys with meditation, yoga, or pulsed electromagnetic field therapy.
Yeah. Well, things are changing. And like these PEMF machines are actually showing what it can do for their animals now, because those bulls they get treated very, very well. And Smooth Operator, he's I think 10 this year, and he was buck and bull of the world. Like most buck and bulls are retired by the time they're 7 or 8.
Wow.
And he's got his own, like this Chad Berger's got a very, very, like an unbelievable exercise program, and he's got one of these machines for his bulls, and it's like his bulls are, they're lasting a lot longer, and it seems to work. And now that's what all the bull riders are using too, just because it helps with recovery and stuff so much. So, but it's interesting. Like I've seen, like, because I'm a farrier as well, and I've seen a lot of different disciplines and stuff, and like from the outside looking in, it looks like rodeo is one of the roughest ones, but it's not. Like some of the things that look the nicest are the roughest ones. Like it's I don't know, like if I could ever come back as a horse, I'd come back as a bucking horse from what I've seen so far compared to a lot of disciplines. Like they get treated very well. Like there's a lot of misconceptions that they tie their private parts up in the flank and stuff, and it's just not true. Like the flank's on there, but they're just trying to kick it off, and they're almost like a border collie dog now, where it's in their DNA to buck. Like you're almost guaranteed to get one, just like a border collie's gonna herd. It doesn't matter if they have kids or chickens or cows or sheep, they're gonna herd. It's just in them. So I don't know if any of this is right or wrong, but the meanest things I've ever seen done to horses actually are by the people that love them the most. So it, I don't know.
Wow. I'm curious, just because I've never seen this done on a horse before. How do they react? Do they kind of get sleepy? Do they get like twitchy? Like, what does it kind of look like once you start applying this therapy?
Well, like the wagon horses were pretty good, like test for me last year because they're off the track, like, and there's some good horses. Like there's some horses. I worked on a few horses that went over $1 million on the track and then went to the chuck wagons. But I start on it with my hands a little bit, but they used to just go in the tie stalls with the wagon horses and work on one with my hands and throw the machine on one. But as soon as they feel it, they know. Like it's especially like an older horse, like those old arthritic guys. They just soak it up. And they know.
Aww.
Like as soon as they like one little muscle twitch, and then they're just like, oh, okay, this is it. And they just sit there and yawn and crack and pop, and it. No, they really like it. It was the wagon horses were good just because those horses off the track are just so on the muscle and so hard, and they've been injected, they've been through the ringer, but the way they responded to it was just phenomenal. I'm not necessarily too keen to go back there, but I learned a lot, and same as the horses with the track. And then soon as like a younger horse, I have, if they're just your average 3-year-old, it's going to be a little bit tougher. They're just attention span ain't there. But the 2 and 3-year-olds I worked on the track that were working hard, they responded to it right away. Like they figured out. Yeah, people are 50-50. But that kind of goes back to horses are a lot more in tune to the sensations of their body than people.
Yes.
So they're pretty honest. They actually, the course I took with Myofascial release, they encourage all their physiotherapists actually that are taking the course to go do it on horses first if they've never done it before, because if you can get a feel for that fascia, then you're good. But yeah, one of the people who taught, or the person who kind of showed me this, actually 3/4 of her customers are actually people now. And she's never been trained on people at all. She's just been trained on horses, so it works, and it's just a feel for that. So
that's so interesting. That's so cool, and I like your whole body approach. It sounds like both with horses and yourself, you're taking care of your body through body work. You're taking care of your mind through meditation. Yoga kind of covers both of those pieces. Do you think that this was innately who you were from the beginning? Have you always been interested in all of these pieces together, or is this something that you found along the way? I mean, I know you talked about a bit of your journey to all of these different things, but was this just you the whole time?
I don't know. Like I always was kind of I could find sore spots on horses and stuff, and I knew, and because I learned how to do a lot of the ranch stuff and the vaquero stuff, like with the big loops and 60-footers and stuff, but it was more of because one of my least favorite things to do, like I like team roping and stuff, it's fast, it can be done, it's over and done with, like those, when it's done right, those steers don't even really know what hit them. But the ranch roping and stuff, I was just, in the whole vaquero method, I was just fascinated by, because everything was about their horse, and I hated ranch roping because those cows are too big, and it was just, I could feel what it was doing to my horse, and I could see after, and it was, so the reason I learned ranch rope and stuff was just to make it smoother and better for my horses, so I didn't sore them up, and then I'd see what other people were doing, and like it could get rough, and it was just, there was that huge disconnect. So I was just, and that wasn't ever really talked about in the world that I was in. So I learned to do a lot of these things just for myself, and I just didn't want to. These jobs had to be done, and they could be done a lot better, the best we could, anyways. And that's what the whole spade bit and the whole vaquero thing is actually all about. It's just it's about stockmanship, and it's about your horse and doing everything smooth so you're never jerking on them and never hurting them. That's why you have the big long ropes and all these different shots, and you're setting things up just to do things as smoothly as possible. So I don't know, like, it was there, but finding the answer it took a long time. Because some of like the massage courses I've seen and that's one thing I've learned too. It's and that's where I like my machine is you can't argue with it. Like these techniques it's all like I think they almost all of them work, but it's just how good the person applying them is and how much work they've done, and it's just, and then how do you even gauge that? It's so tough. Like it's so I just did the things that I found or I thought I could learn and results, and then I also started seeing where all this work I do too, and just knowing what I know about horses' feet, is it all starts at their feet. And if you can't get their feet right, it's like, yeah, you got no foundation there. So I learned a shoe, and then it just started, I working my way up from there, I guess. Because that's why I learned the shoe actually too, is I had a really good farrier at home, but he was too expensive and really hard to get into. And then everyone else I tried, my horses didn't feel very good after it. I didn't know what it was, so that's why I just learned to do it myself. But oh, go ahead.
One thing that I wanted to, and we haven't really touched on it yet, but I wanted to hear more about your 10-day silent retreats that you go on, and kind of weaves into just, you're talking a lot about just kind of that inner sense of knowing and kind of that place of getting very clear in your mind and being very grounded in your body. But yeah, when did you start doing your 10-day silent retreats?
Well, I started when I wrecked my shoulder, and they told me I needed shoulder surgery. That's when I started all the yoga and stuff, and I started a job in the oil field the same day, actually, as my first yoga class. And so I was moving rigs at night and just trying to get ready for my shoulder surgery, basically. And so Eckhart Tolle stuff made sense to me, and it was all wound up working, and I wound up seeing my surgeon and didn't have to get surgery. He wanted to do another MRI, actually, but I just said, no, I'm going to be grateful that my shoulder's better and just carry on from there. But I wound up getting sent up to Fort McMurray after that, and it just, I don't know, Fort McMurray just didn't sit right with me. Like, it just didn't. And I was working 20 hours a day and was on a day rate, wasn't getting treated very well at all. So I wound up just kind of had a bit of a meltdown and quit and left. And a friend of mine told me about this 10-day yoga retreat, she called it. So, well, and I should go back a little bit too. I would have really bad headaches and stuff from my wreck because, like, the whole left side of my face is a mesh now, and I got like 20 screws and wires on the other side. And then while I was in the hospital, they had my morphine set wrong, and they OD'd me.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, my mom, if she wouldn't have been in the room, she went to go wipe a trickle of blood away, and she didn't feel any breath. So, I just didn't really like painkillers after that, and after that deal, I just like, and then I looked into what morphine and all these painkillers actually do, and it's like, to me, personally, they just hindered my healing, because I want to feel like pain's a good thing. If you can feel that sensation, that means your body's healing. As soon as you numb yourself to it, like I was always scared to ride bulls with it because that pain's a guide. Like I'd ride hurt and I was always rode hurt, but it kept me safe almost, and it meant healing too to me. And I just didn't want to take painkillers, so after Fort McMurray anyways, I wound up a friend of mine told me about a 10-day yoga retreat, she called it, so I just signed up for one in Merritt, and there's a waiting list, and a lot of people, like, it's a scary thing. So a lot of people kind of, I find out, chicken out at the last minute. I didn't know what I was getting into, but I wound up going, and I was probably the worst student ever. I tried to leave, and it all just, it made sense, but it's the meditations and stuff there, it's called Vipassana, and it's basically Buddhism untouched. And then I like to rip things apart like that, so I don't have to do them a lot of times. So it's like, I'm like, they want your money, and it was by donations from old students, and I'm like, well, they're a cult, and like, well, they don't even advertise. It's all, so but it's Buddhism untouched. So like, what that is, like, the original definition of meditation actually was detachment from the senses. So you have to turn off your 5 senses. So that has to be done in stillness and silence. So the meditations they teach you are just to build up to that, and you just start going within your own body, and there's a lot there. Like it doesn't sound like much, but being quiet for 11 days is pretty tough. And it really
sounds like a lot to me, Randy. I could imagine being stuck with myself for that length of time. Would be some stuff would probably come up. Some issues would probably come up that you're avoiding. Like, I can imagine it being really a painful and interesting process.
Yeah, it's really it's kind of the Band-Aid method, I guess, because they do have, like, it's a pretty pure organization. Like I said, they don't advertise. It was started by well, it hasn't changed in 2,500 years. It just stayed in Burma, basically, where all other Buddhism kind of turned into a religion almost. And then it was actually a Hindu guy that brought this back, Goenka. He was just getting really bad headaches, and he's very high up Hindu in Burma, and he wound up there's no religion, there's no dogma or anything that comes with this, so his priest said it's fine, so his headaches went away, and then he could get to India, and his mom was sick, so she wanted to learn, so her and 5 friends started to went to learn. Then like 40 people wanted to learn, and then so he just said, we'll build an ashram, and he said if it works, then it'll spread, and if not, it's going to die. And there's 160 or 170 of them all over the world now, but they have a research institute that goes with it, because just a lot of people have went there, like, well, I guess psychologists and stuff, and this Dr. Paul Fleischman started a research institute, and they've compared it to 11 years of psychotherapy in 10 days. So it's pretty intense. Like but it does get to, anything that you want to avoid, it'll bring it up. So, and then it just, after that, it took me, I was really glad I did it, but it changed the whole way I thought, and every ideal, like, that I was stuck to. Like, I was very stuck on the image of just being a cowboy, and that's all I was and stuff. And it's it's just, it is what it is. I just kind of realized that we're all just wearing costumes, and we can be what we want to be, or so
Sometimes when we go through these transformations ourselves, that can affect the people around us too. I'm curious about, did it affect your relationship with some of your cowboy buddies? Did it affect how they saw you? Did everyone else kind of flow with you as you went through your own transformations? How did that work for you?
It's been interesting. Like my cowboy friends are fascinated by it. Actually, like some of them. It's the yoga world that I throw off more than anything. It seems like because like my cowboy friends in like rural Alberta is actually, if you want to talk about anything, they'll just ask you a million questions, and it's pretty non-judgmental in a lot of ways. Some ways it's not, but the yoga world, a lot of people squirm in that world, I guess, because I don't know. It's good for both worlds, I guess, because I'm not your stereotypical image of either. And I can go in, and I've done the work on both ends of it, and I don't know, it's made me realize that as soon as you just latch onto an image, you're done. We're just here to learn, and it's, and you're going to miss out on a lot if you if I would have just clung to that cowboy image, I would have missed out on a lot, I guess. And I love doing all that stuff still, and I can do whatever.
Sounds like an incredible transformation for you, and just such a transformative experience. Do you have any kind of goals or aspirations with your body work?
Well, I'm just kind of seeing where it goes. Like it's changed a whole bunch. Like I wound up starting out on the track and the wagons, and I just I don't want to be around that anymore. Like as soon as you start throwing age and horses in, it's tough. It's because those horses just get. I learned a lot, and I know what a horse can take and everything now, but it's just not a world I want to go back to. But I'd just like to stay busy with my machine, and I'm going to be doing some roping lessons here at Renee's and probably take on a few outside horses, and we'll just see where it goes this year too, because things might be shut down, and it's been a good week. It's just I'd kind of settle in the unknown for a while anyways.
Yes, I feel like it's just been a huge lesson for me in learning how to lean into uncertainty in a good way.
Yeah.
It's just
it's been good. So
so I think we're all kind of bracing ourselves to see, where things will go, and trying to stay positive.
Mm-hmm.
For our future downloaders of the podcast and listeners and watchers, originally today, Randy was scheduled, because he lives locally, to come into the podcast studio. And you'll notice, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see 3 screens because we're currently in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, and we're in isolation, but we still wanted to have this fantastic podcast. So Randy very sweetly, last minute, agreed to do a virtual podcast with us instead of an in-person podcast. So one day maybe Randy will get you in the studio, but we sure appreciate you still being keen to do the interview.
Oh no, it's been good, thanks.
Any last pieces that you wanted to touch on that we didn't cover?
No, not that I can really think of. You guys are.
I think no. I think that was just fantastic. I found this really interesting, and it's cool talking to someone who's had such diverse experiences and has been open-minded. Like, you seem like you've got a balance of, you've got grounded cowboy, as well as you're interested in how the mind works and the body works and all that kind of thing. Is there anything that you want to promote personally right now? Are you on Instagram, if anyone wants to follow you, or Facebook? I know that I don't think you put your website happening yet, but possibly in the future.
I'm changing my name probably. Well, I'm pre-release PMF right now, but it doesn't really suit the Kootenai, so I'll probably change my name and everything in the next little bit, but yeah, this week has just been crazy. I've been getting moved, and but I will be during this. I got a deal where you can drop your horses off at Renee's here, and hopefully we're gonna start roping lessons and everything. I got the arena cleared off, and as soon as this coronavirus thing settles, yeah, I'll be doing a little road trip and heading out. But until then, I guess, yeah, I can take on horses. I'm gonna post it today, but I got a deal where you can leave your horse for 3 or 6 days at Renee's here. We got a few empty pens. So until everything settles over here, and then yeah, I will probably take on an outside horse in the next month, or a couple outside horses too, if things don't settle down before the snow melts. So.
And how do people get a hold of you if they're wanting to book their horses in?
You can go to my Facebook. It's Prairie Lease PMF, or my phone number is 403-370-5668, and just call or text.
Great. Thank you so much, Randy. And I think, Amira, is that a wrap?
I think that's a wrap.
Yay!
All right. Well, thank you.
If you want more Friends on Horses, you can find us on Facebook at Friends on Horses Podcast.
Check it out for all the latest and greatest horsey news.
You can find us on the web at friendsonhorsespodcast.com.
Or Instagram at friendsonhorses_podcast.
Like what you hear? Help us quit our hay jobs by supporting Friends on Horses. You can support us by rating our episodes on iTunes.
Becoming an ongoing sponsor through Patreon.
Or simply by spreading the word about our show.
Have some feedback?
We'd love to hear from you.
Contact us via email at friendsonhorses@gmail.com.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.